Uber buried 5,827 sexual assault reports in 3 years. What they did to hide them is worse. On November 14, 2017, a software engineer named Susan Fowler walked into a law office in downtown San Francisco. She carried a thumb drive. On it were 124,000 internal Uber documents. Documents that would expose the largest corporate sexual assault cover-up in Silicon Valley history. The files contained everything: victim names, settlement amounts, internal emails from executives ordering evidence deletion, and a playbook titled Incident Response Protocol that read like a criminal conspiracy manual. Uber wasn't just ignoring assault claims. They were actively suppressing them, paying victims to sign NDAs, threatening drivers with deportation if they talked, deleting ride records before police could subpoena them. The company had spent $7 million in hush money between 2014 and 2017. But nobody knew. Not investors. Not regulators. Not the millions of riders climbing into Uber vehicles every single day. The documents revealed something even darker. Uber had a dedicated team for this. 12 employees whose only job was making assault allegations disappear. They called themselves the Special Investigations Unit. Internal emails called them something else: the cleanup crew. What Susan found in those files would bring down executives, trigger federal investigations, and wipe billions off Uber's market value. But here's what nobody expected. The cover-up went all the way to the CEO's office. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to 2014. Uber was exploding. The company was operating in 300 cities across 65 countries. Valuation hit $8 billion. Founder Travis Kalanick was on the cover of Forbes. But behind the hockey stick growth charts, a different pattern was emerging. Assault reports were flooding in. By March 2014, Uber's customer service team was receiving an average of 170 assault-related complaints every single week. That's 24 per day. The complaints ranged from groping to rape. Drivers assaulting passengers. Passengers assaulting drivers. The company faced a choice: implement expensive safety protocols and background check systems, or handle it quietly. They chose quietly. In August 2014, Uber hired a crisis management firm called Ergo. Ergo specialized in reputation protection for Fortune 500 companies. Their fee was $0.3 million annually. Their job was simple: make the assault problem invisible. Ergo's strategy had 3 parts. First, settle claims before they became lawsuits. Second, require ironclad NDAs with financial penalties for violation. Third, never create a centralized database of incidents that regulators could discover. It worked. Between 2014 and 2016, Uber settled 437 sexual assault claims. Average payout was $0.7000. Total cost was $6.8 million. And the public knew about exactly 0 of them. The settlements contained a specific clause: victims couldn't talk to police without Uber's written permission. If they did, they'd owe Uber triple the settlement amount. One woman in Boston settled for $75,000 after being raped by her driver in 2015. When she later spoke to detectives, Uber sued her for $25,000. They dropped the suit only after the Boston Globe threatened to publish the story. But the NDAs were just the first layer. What Uber did to the evidence itself was far more disturbing. On January 12, 2016, a Phoenix police detective named Maria Gonzalez requested ride data for an assault investigation. A passenger had been attacked by her driver. She had his first name and the approximate pickup time. That's all she needed. Uber should have handed over the records within 48 hours. Standard procedure for any tech platform. Instead, Uber's legal team stalled for 73 days. When they finally responded, they claimed the data had been automatically purged per retention policy. Detective Gonzalez didn't believe them. She filed a motion to compel. During discovery, she found something explosive. An internal Uber email from March 2015. Subject line, Data Retention Update. The email came from Uber's head of legal operations, Craig Clark. It outlined a new policy. Ride data would now be deleted after 90 days instead of the previous 2-year standard. But here's the critical part. The policy only applied to rides flagged with specific incident codes. Codes like SA1, which meant sexual assault. Normal rides kept their data for years. Assault rides got wiped in 3 months. This wasn't a blanket privacy policy. It was selective evidence destruction. The timing was perfect. Police requests typically took 4 to 6 months from incident to subpoena. By then, Uber's data would be gone. Subscribe so stories like this don't stay buried. Detective Gonzalez shared her findings with the Phoenix District Attorney's Office. They contacted the FBI. By June 2016, a federal investigation was underway. But Uber had another defense layer. The Special Investigations Unit. This 12-person team operated from a separate office in Salt Lake City. They had their own email domain, their own legal counsel, and a very specific mandate. When an assault claim came in, the SIU made first contact with the victim. They presented themselves as a support team, offered free counseling, covered medical bills, built trust. Then came the settlement offer. Always fast, always generous, always with the NDA. Internal emails obtained by the FBI showed the strategy clearly. One message from SIU Director Michael Gonzalez read, "Our goal is resolution before the victim has time to lawyer up." Speed equals silence. Between January 2015 and December 2016, the SIU contacted 1,847 assault victims. Only 91 ended up filing police reports. The rest settled. That's a 95% suppression rate. But the SIU did something else. Something the FBI would later call witness tampering. They convinced victims not to cooperate with police investigations. Internal metrics tracked this explicitly. The SIU maintained a diversion rate measuring how many victims they successfully kept from law enforcement. The target was 80%. In 2016, they hit 87%. One case illustrates the system perfectly. In March 2016, a college student in Miami was assaulted by her Uber driver. She reported it to Uber within 2 hours. The SIU contacted her within 4 hours. They offered her $0,000 full tuition coverage and 3 years of therapy. In exchange, she'd sign the NDA and decline to press charges. She was 19 years old. She signed. When Miami police contacted her 3 weeks later, she refused to make a statement. The driver continued working for Uber for another 8 months. He was eventually arrested for assaulting 2 more passengers. What investigators found next made the cover-up even more sinister. In October 2016, Dutch regulators raided Uber's European headquarters in Amsterdam. They were investigating labor law violations. What they found was a sexual assault cover-up that spanned 27 countries. The Amsterdam office housed a server farm with encrypted backups of incidents Uber had deleted from US databases. The Dutch police seized 41 terabytes of data. Inside were 8,761 sexual assault reports from Uber's international markets. Reports that had never been shared with local police. Countries included Brazil, India, South Africa, Mexico, and Indonesia. In Sao Paulo alone, there were 1,203 assault reports between 2014 and 2016. Brazilian authorities knew about 14 of them. Uber had created a 2-tier system. In countries with weak data protection laws, they kept detailed records for internal risk assessment. In countries with strong subpoena powers like the US, they deleted evidence. The Amsterdam files revealed something else. Uber was tracking repeat offenders but not deactivating them. One driver in New Delhi had 8 separate assault complaints over 14 months. He was still active. Another in Mexico City had 6 complaints. Still driving. Why would Uber keep dangerous drivers on the platform? The answer was in an internal memo from October 2015. Subject: driver supply constraints. The memo outlined a problem. In high-growth markets, Uber couldn't recruit drivers fast enough. Removing drivers for assault allegations created supply shortages. Supply shortages meant longer wait times. Longer wait times meant riders switched to competitors. So Uber made a calculation. They'd only deactivate drivers after criminal convictions, not allegations. Even multiple allegations. The memo included a cost-benefit analysis. Losing a driver to deactivation cost Uber approximately $400 in lost revenue annually. Settling an assault claim cost an average of $0.7000. But assault claims were rare enough that the math still favored keeping drivers active. They literally calculated that sexual assault settlements were cheaper than maintaining driver quality standards. The FBI investigation, now expanded to include international crimes, uncovered the final piece. Uber executives knew exactly what was happening. Email chains obtained through subpoenas showed Travis Kalanick receiving monthly incident briefings from the SIU. The briefings included assault statistics, settlement amounts, and suppression rates. Kalanick replied to these emails. In one from July 2016, he wrote, "Keep doing what you're doing. This doesn't leave the building." His chief legal officer, Salyu, was even more direct. In an email to the SIU director, she wrote, "We cannot afford a centralized assault database. If it exists, someone will subpoena it. Better to settle case by case and maintain plausible deniability about patterns." This wasn't negligence. This was a design system. A corporate machine built to prioritize growth over human safety. The FBI would eventually bring charges. But not against who you'd expect. In March 2017, federal prosecutors charged Michael Gonzalez, the SIU director, with obstruction of justice and witness tampering. He faced 47 years in prison. Travis Kalanick was never charged. Neither was Salyu. They claimed they relied on legal advice and had no direct knowledge of witness tampering. The legal advice came from their own legal team. The same team that designed the suppression system. Gonzalez took a plea deal. He served 18 months. Uber paid a $48 million fine to the FTC. And they agreed to implement new safety measures. Background checks. In-app emergency buttons. Annual transparency reports. The 2019 Transparency Report, Uber's first, showed the real scale. In the United States alone, Uber received 5,981 sexual assault reports in 2018 and 2019 combined. That's after the reforms. The numbers before the reforms were likely double. Here's the most disturbing part. Other companies were watching. Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart. They all had similar problems. And many adopted similar solutions. The Uber playbook became the industry standard. Settle fast. Use NDAs. Delete data. Avoid centralized tracking. So what changed? Not enough. In 2022, another leak exposed similar practices at Lyft. They'd settled 3,247 assault claims between 2017 and 2021. All with NDAs. The gig economy runs on a simple formula. Maximize transactions. Minimize friction. Safety protocols are friction. Background checks slow hiring. Incident investigations interrupt service. Transparency invites regulation. So companies optimize for speed and scale. And when people get hurt, they optimize for silence. The Uber files prove that billion-dollar companies will choose profits over safety every single time. Unless they're forced to do otherwise. Not by ethics. Not by leadership. Only by exposure. Susan Fowler, the engineer who leaked those documents, was fired 3 weeks after meeting with lawyers. Uber claimed it was performance-related. She sued for retaliation. They settled for an undisclosed amount. With an NDA. She's never spoken publicly about the settlement terms. The system protects itself. Even when it's exposed, it adapts and survives. Today, Uber is worth $12 billion. Travis Kalanick sold his shares for $0.7 billion and started a ghost kitchen company. The SIU was disbanded, but its core members were reassigned to trust and safety. Different name. Same job. If you're watching this, you've probably used Uber. Maybe this week. The app doesn't show you which drivers have prior complaints. That data is still internal. Still encrypted. Still unavailable to riders making split-second decisions about their safety. The next leak is already out there. Someone inside another company right now is looking at files they shouldn't ignore. Wondering if exposure is worth the cost. These stories only surface when people like you demand they stay visible. Subscribe and hit the bell for a new dark truth every day. Because the biggest question isn't what Uber did. It's how many other companies are doing it right now. Subscribe and hit the bell for a new dark truth every day.